Is that all you can do?
He appeared from nowhere. No royal blood, no army, no wealth. Just a voice that would seal the heavens and bring a kingdom to its knees. For 3 years and 6 months, not a single drop of rain would fall on Israel. The earth would crack open, crops would wither, and the people would cry out in agony. All because one man dared to speak the words God gave him, knowing it might cost him everything. But who was this man? How did he survive alone in the wilderness, fed by creatures of the air? What did he witness before being swept into heaven without tasting death? Today, you'll walk beside Elijah through every moment of his extraordinary journey. A prophet marked by impossible confrontations, breathtaking miracles, and an ending that defied even the grave itself. Prepare yourself for a story of faith tested by fire, courage forged in silence, and a destiny that not even death could contain. Israel had forgotten who they were. The songs that once echoed through the desert now fell silent in the shadow of pagan altars. Streets that once rang with the reading of God's law became marketplaces for strange gods. Baal and Asherah captured the hearts of the people, and sitting on the throne was the worst king Israel had ever known. Ahab, son of Omri, didn't just tolerate the worship of false gods. He made it the official religion of the nation. When he married Jezebel, a Phoenician princess devoted to Baal, Israel's spiritual collapse accelerated beyond anything the nation had experienced before. Into this darkness stepped a man nobody expected. He didn't come from Jerusalem's temple or the royal courts. He wore no priestly robes and carried no credentials of authority. His name was Elijah from Tishbe, a village so small that most had never heard of it. No impressive family tree preceded him. No prophetic dynasty claimed him as their own. To the world, he was invisible, but inside him burned something that didn't come from earth. The passion of the God of heaven consumed him. Elijah didn't arrive with grand speeches or carefully crafted arguments. He simply walked through the palace gates, stood before the throne corrupted by idolatry, and delivered one sentence that would change everything. As surely as the Lord God of Israel lives, the one I serve, there will be no dew or rain in these years except by my word. The silence that followed cut deeper than any sword. Ahab sat speechless. The guards stood frozen. Jezebel wasn't there, but when she heard what happened, an unquenchable hatred for this man took root in her heart. Elijah didn't wait to see the results. He knew the weight of his declaration exceeded the value of his own life. The prophet disappeared, but the judgment remained. No rain. The sky would become iron. Without dew, the earth would turn to bronze. Springs would run dry. Crops would fail. The people who had chased after false gods would now experience thirst, both physical and spiritual. God wasn't simply remaining quiet. He was closing the heavens entirely. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. The weather never changed. Not a cloud appeared. Not a drop fell. Every sunrise became a reminder of coming judgment. Every sunset drew a groan from the parched earth. Israel began to writhe in agony. Farmers muttered complaints. The priests of Baal cried out desperately, but no answer came. Heaven only responds when the voice comes from covenant relationship, and that covenant had been shattered. In this landscape of growing desperation, God spoke again, but not to the people. He spoke to his servant. "Leave this place, Elijah. Go eastward and hide yourself by the brook Cherith, which flows into the Jordan." This wasn't the time for confrontation. This was the time for silence. The prophet who had dared to lock the heavens now needed to learn how to listen in hiding. Elijah obeyed without question. He walked away from the cities, away from the crowds, away from the eyes of Ahab, and entered the solitude of the desert. But he wasn't abandoned. The one who closes the sky also provides for those who trust him. The brook Cherith still had water flowing, clear and cold. It was a quiet miracle in a time of drought. And every morning and evening, ravens came flying with bread and meat in their beaks, sent directly by God himself. This unlikely provision was more than physical nourishment. It was a constant reminder that even in seasons of judgment, the Lord cares for those who trust his word. But isolation brings questions. The nights in that valley stretched long. Wind whistled through the rocks and thoughts came unbidden. Elijah had spoken in God's name, but now he was hidden. The people suffered and he could do nothing to help them. The idols still stood. Jezebel remained in power. Ahab still wore his crown. Had any of it mattered? Every day at the stream tested his faith. The daily miracle didn't prevent human doubt. Elijah looked at the locked heavens and wondered if they would ever open again. He believed, but he couldn't see the outcome. And God's silence was sometimes deafening. With each passing day, the water level dropped. The sound of the current, once strong and steady, became a whisper. The brook Cherith, like Israel itself, was drying up. Even this place of provision was beginning to say goodbye. And Elijah understood that when even hiding places fail, something new must happen. That drought wasn't just punishment for the people. It was also training ground for the prophet. God was shaping him not merely as a messenger but as a man who understood hunger, who tasted the bitterness of solitude, who learned to depend on what cannot be seen, a man being prepared to confront not only kings but his own limitations. The time at the brook wasn't permanent, but it was necessary. Before standing on Mount Carmel, the prophet needed to kneel in the desert. Before facing thousands, he needed to be fed by ravens. The sky remained closed. The people hadn't repented. The throne was still occupied by those who mocked God, but in the silence, heaven was preparing its next move. Elijah didn't know it yet, but the end of that stream would mark the beginning of something far greater. When heaven closes, even God's spokesman must learn to live in silence. Against the surrounding scarcity, he discovers that divine faithfulness lives in the smallest gestures, in the quiet repetitions of a God who needs no stage to demonstrate his power. The sky stays closed, but each morning brings the promise of another sustained day. There are no spectacles, no thunder, no grand visions. Only ravens, only water, only God, and slowly that begins to be enough. Cherith, with its rocky soil and winds whispering among the stones, wasn't chosen randomly. There, far from cities and human observation, Elijah confronts the fragility of flesh and the strength of spirit. Without distractions, everything within him rises to the surface. Hunger visits. Fear touches him. Loneliness pierces deep. But each of these emotions is overcome in silence because God continues speaking even when everything seems quiet. Food arrives twice daily, as faithful as the sunrise. The ravens, which according to the law should never serve as divine instruments, become servants of heaven. Through them, bread and meat rest in the prophet's hands. Elijah learns not to question the method but to trust the source. He doesn't know where the food comes from. He doesn't know from whose table it was taken or what paths the ravens crossed. What he knows is that it arrives, and that's sufficient. He sits near the bank, watches the movement of water, and allows himself to be shaped. His eyes, which once stared at Ahab's throne, now turn toward the simplicity of a flowing stream. His ears, trained to hear heavenly commands, now tune into the sounds of wind and flowing water. His body, once ready for battle, now learns the value of stillness. And his soul, in silence, expands. There's no hurry at Cherith. Time stretches there without commitments or calendars. Elijah loses track of days. The only markers are the low flights of birds and sips of water, but this doesn't make him passive. On the contrary, each day tests his faith. Each sunrise brings a new challenge to trust. God is teaching not through words but through constancy. Elijah begins to understand the difference between divine sustenance and human sustenance. In the world of men, abundance signals approval, but there in hiding, he learns that a little with God surpasses abundance without him. A piece of bread from an unclean beak when sent by the Lord holds more value than a banquet at corrupt tables. At the same time, Elijah confronts the concept of waiting. There are no missions to fulfill, no people to instruct, no kings to rebuke, only waiting. And waiting is also ministry, because there are times when God prepares not the word but the messenger. At Cherith, it's the prophet who's being worked on inwardly, invisibly, essentially. During the nights, the stars seem closer. Elijah gazes at them reverently, as if searching for some sign, some hint of future direction. But no answer comes, only silence. And even this silence begins to sound like a voice. God is teaching him to recognize presence without outward manifestation, to trust without evidence, to depend without guarantees. One morning, however, something shifts. Elijah approaches the stream as usual to quench his thirst before the day's heat arrives, but as he bends down, he notices the water is shallower. The once steady flow has become a thin trickle. He doesn't panic. He waits another day. The next, he realizes the sound of water no longer echoes between the rocks as before, just a trickle, a pause, a wet silence. Still the ravens come just as faithfully, but the stream grows ever weaker, ever drier, until one day it stops. The last drop slips through Elijah's fingers like a final whisper. He doesn't rebel. He doesn't rush forward. He simply observes and understands. Cherith has reached its end. What had been his place of refuge for months now becomes a dry riverbed cracked by the sun. But Elijah grasps what many wouldn't. The end of a season isn't the end of God's care. It's merely the announcement of a new chapter. The same God who told him to hide will now move him again. When the water dries up, it's a sign that the next lesson is about to begin. Elijah gathers his few belongings. The remains of his clothing, a staff, the living memory of an everyday miracle. There's no clear path. There's no new order yet. But there is certainty. The God who guided him this far will not leave him without direction. Hunger may return, but faith is now firm. Thirst may reappear, but his heart has already been satisfied. Elijah is no longer the same man who arrived among ravens and stones. He has become a vessel prepared, ready to be used. And even without knowing his destination, he rises because he has learned that God's faithfulness isn't found in circumstances, but in the character of the one who promises. The sun burns stronger, the silence deepens, the wind blows warmer, and the stream is dry. But even the water of provision can cease when the next lesson approaches. And there, before the dry, crackling bed of the brook, Elijah stands waiting for the Eternal's next step. Then in the now familiar silence, the word echoes again. Clear, firm, non-negotiable. Rise up, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and live there. I have commanded a widow to provide for you. The order sounds strange. Zarephath doesn't belong to Israel. It's pagan territory, the domain of Sidon, the very heart of idolatry from which Jezebel came. But Elijah doesn't argue. His time at Cherith taught him that God's plan often takes paths that reason would never choose. He gets up, shakes off the dust, and continues his journey. His heart doesn't know what awaits him, but he trusts. God is already there. The road is long, the heat biting. Elijah advances through desert paths as if walking between two worlds, that of scarcity which has remained behind and that of promise which has not yet been revealed. Hunger accompanies him. Thirst is constant, but he continues. Each step is sustained by one reminder. God has never failed. As he approaches the entrance to Zarephath, he sees a thin woman bent over, gathering twigs with trembling hands. Her appearance reveals days of deprivation. Worn clothing, dry skin, dull eyes, as if she no longer expects anything from life. Elijah recognizes her then. There stands the widow, the one who will provide for him. She doesn't know it yet, but heaven has already chosen her. Woman, says the prophet, his voice rough from the desert, please bring me a little water in a vessel so I may drink. The woman watches him for a moment. Her eyes waver, but without a word she turns and begins walking toward her house. Elijah then adds, and bring me a piece of bread in your hand as well. She stops. Her shoulders slump, and for the first time her voice emerges, not with anger but with the pain of surrender. As surely as the Lord your God lives, I have no bread. Only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. Here I am gathering 2 sticks to prepare something for myself and my son. We will eat it and then we will die. The words are blades. There's no exaggeration. She doesn't dramatize. She simply reports reality. This would be the last meal, the silent farewell between mother and son. Death doesn't come with swords in Zarephath. It comes with absence. It comes with the sound of emptiness in jars. It comes with the silence of oil that no longer flows. But Elijah hears this and instead of simply being moved, speaks with authority. He knows he's not there by chance. There's a hidden purpose in that woman's pain. Do not be afraid. Go and do as you have said, but first make me a small cake and bring it out here. Then you can make some for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, nor will the jug of oil run dry until the day the Lord sends rain upon the earth. Silence falls between them. For a moment only the wind speaks. The widow stares at him, a stranger, a foreigner, a starving man asking for her last bit of life. But there's something in his words, something that wounds and at the same time heals, something that challenges and also consoles. She believes even without understanding. She believes, and that changes everything. She walks back to her house. Her steps are heavy, but her soul is moving. She lights the fire, mixes the flour with the little oil, forms a small cake. It's not enough for 3 people, but she obeys. Logic says, preserve yourself. Faith whispers, give it to the prophet. And she does. When Elijah takes the food in his hands and brings it to his mouth, the invisible moves. Heaven records the gesture. And there in that poor house begins a silent, daily, constant miracle. The kind of miracle that doesn't make headlines but transforms destinies. Because when she returns to the jar, there's still flour. When she lifts the jug, there's still oil. The next day the same, and the next, and the next. The widow doesn't understand what's happening, but she sees. Every morning the same ritual. Every afternoon the same surprise. The flour that doesn't diminish. The oil that doesn't run dry. The last meal never happens. And what would have been death becomes survival. What would have been lament becomes praise. What was the end becomes a new beginning. Her faith wasn't robust. It wasn't theological. It wasn't religious. It was just a fragile surrender before a firm word, and that was enough to move heaven. Elijah remains there in her home. The woman welcomes him. The son, still frail, begins to regain the sparkle in his eyes. The simple house, once a dwelling of despair, now becomes the prophet's shelter. God chose a pagan heart to sustain a holy servant. He chose the margin to manifest provision, because the miracle isn't in quantity, it's in obedience. Days pass. The rain still doesn't come, but in that house there's no lack of sustenance, neither bread nor peace. Elijah is no longer just a guest. He becomes part of the story of these lives, and there, within shabby walls, something is born that cannot be told in words alone. An invisible bond formed by quiet trust between a prophet and a woman who dared to believe. Zarephath, which once represented distance, idolatry, and fear, now becomes an altar, a meeting place, a place where God revealed that even at the ends of the earth he still sees. He still calls. He still cares. And yes, faith can blossom where no one expects it, even in the heart of a dying widow. But something begins to change. A new silence invades the house. It's not hunger. It's not thirst. It's something deeper, an invisible harbinger like a cloud forming in the distance about to obscure the sun of a miracle. Because the bread that sustained them wasn't the biggest purpose of that story. The next lesson is about to knock on the door. Before we continue, I need to ask something of you. If this story is touching your heart, if you're feeling the weight of Elijah's journey, then please subscribe to this channel and leave a like. This truly helps us continue sharing profound stories like this one. Stories of ordinary people who walked with an extraordinary God through deserts, famine, persecution, and miracles. Your support allows us to keep bringing these encounters to life. Now, let's journey together toward the moment that will test everything Elijah believes. Amid the new silence hanging over the house, life continues, not with euphoria, nor with promises of abundance, but with a kind of peace that only a constant miracle can offer. The stone stove still crackles. The pot still heats the same handful of flour. The jug still pours the same trickle of oil. And against all logic, nothing runs out. It's difficult to explain the inexplicable. Even more difficult is experiencing the supernatural as if it were ordinary. But that's exactly what the widow, her son, and Elijah learned to do. Day after day, what was once improbable becomes routine, and routine becomes sacred. The bread that never ends, the oil that never dries up, the provision that never fails. In the morning, before the sun warms the stones of Zarephath streets, Elijah rises. In silence, he kneels in a corner of the house and prays. It's no longer a cry for deliverance. It's constant gratitude for what continues. The faith that once relied on signs is now grounded in constancy, because the greatest miracle is what persists. The widow no longer walks hunched over. Her steps, once slow, now have purpose. She knows sustenance will come, even if her eyes cannot see from where. Each dawn she walks to the jar, holds the container reverently, and observes. There is still oil. She opens the lid of the pot and smiles. The flour is there, always enough, never more, never less. And the boy, his eyes once dulled by hunger, now shine like the windows of the house on sunny mornings. He runs, laughs, plays with the twigs that once would have served as his last fire. The boy who was about to die now flourishes among the remains of ash and the smell of bread. Elijah watches him tenderly. That child is a living testament that God doesn't just answer prayers. He transforms stories. Time passes, perhaps weeks, perhaps months. The sky still remains without rain. But inside that house there's a different climate, a climate of provision, a climate of learning. Elijah, accustomed to God's greatness in confrontations and public declarations, now sees his hand in the smallest gestures, in the clink of the spoon, in the steam from the heated flour, in the oil that extends beyond what is possible. And this is the climax of the miracle, not the extraordinary that shocks, but the everyday that remains. It's easy to see God in great storms, in thunder, in open heavens. It's difficult to recognize him in the same piece of bread repeated for days, weeks, months. But it is there, exactly there, that Elijah is molded anew. Not for Carmel, not for the prophets of Baal, but for God. To learn that the same Lord who locks the heavens also nourishes in silence. The widow's house becomes a sanctuary, a temple not made of stone but of faith, an altar where fire doesn't consume oxen but where the flame of hope never goes out. At each meal, the three sit down. They eat in silence or with few words, but in every look there is reverence. The boy, even without understanding everything, knows something holy is happening. He was born to die of hunger, but now he lives surrounded by bread. There are no neighbors coming in, no crowds gathering at the door. God doesn't make a spectacle in Zarephath. He provides a miracle without applause, bread without fanfare, oil without fame. And so in this sacred cycle, hearts are stilled. The widow who once prepared for death now cultivates life. Elijah, who once fled, now remains. And the boy who once had his story defined by its ending now lives unexpected chapters. The time in Zarephath is no longer a time of despair. It is a time of teaching, of revelation, of a veiled alliance between heaven and earth. Until one of those days, while the wood crackled and the smell of fresh bread filled the air, Elijah realized there was not a single day without provision. Not a single moment did the word fail. And more than that, the miracle isn't just in what is given, but in the heart that has learned to trust without needing to see everything. The widow no longer lives in fear. She lives in faithfulness. Elijah then understands. Cherith taught him to depend. Zarephath teaches him to abide. Each season has its purpose, and the daily miracle of bread, seemingly simple, is a living reminder that God is where there is surrender. He not only uses great signs, but dwells in the small acts of faith repeated in silence. Therefore, no meal is ordinary. No day is the same. The miracle is renewed like the sunrise. The oil flows with the same lightness of one who knows it won't be the last. The flour mixes with water with the dignity of one who no longer fears the end. Until an unexpected shadow invades the house. It doesn't come through cracks in the wall nor through the overcast sky. It comes from within. It begins with a muffled moan, a changed tone of voice, a shudder in the boy's small body. The mother runs to him. Her trembling hands touch his burning forehead. The child's smile fades. His breath becomes shallow. Elijah jumps to his feet, but no words can reverse the moment. The bread is still on the table. The flour is still resting in the pot. The jar is still leaking oil, but now something greater than hunger returns to the scene: death. She doesn't ask permission. She doesn't knock. She just walks in. and like a cruel visitor she settles right where life had once flourished. The woman in despair turns to the prophet. Her eyes, once filled with gratitude, now fill with anguish. The house that had become a refuge once again becomes a scene of foretold mourning, and bread cannot prevent what is to come. In an instant, everything that was a routine of miracles turns into confusion and distress. The boy who days before was playing with twigs and running around the house now lies motionless on the small bed of straw. His skin pales, his lips lose their color, and the air which once entered lightly refuses to enter again. The mother calls to him. There is no answer. She rocks his body. Nothing. She presses her ear to his chest, searching for some sound, a single trace of life. Silence. The same silence that once represented God's care now sounds like a sentence. She stands up violently. Her distraught gaze mingles despair and profound pain. Her bare feet slap the clay floor as she advances toward Elijah, who stands watching, unresponsive. The woman's pain explodes into words that cut like blades. "What do I have to do with you, man of God? Have you come to me to remind me of my guilt and kill my son?" Elijah remains motionless. His hands are open, his eyes fixed on her. He doesn't argue. He doesn't try to justify himself because her pain is legitimate. She's not just losing a child. She's losing the miracle. She's losing hope. The woman who once heard the promise of inexhaustible bread now sees her son's breathless body before her eyes. What value is the flour in the pot if the child's heart no longer beats? What meaning does the oil that never runs dry have if the breath of life has faded? The miracle, once constant, now seems to mock the tragedy. Elijah approaches cautiously. He touches the widow's shoulder, still wet with tears. In a low, hoarse voice he asks, "Give me your son." She doesn't answer. She simply hands him over as if handing over her whole world collapsing into her arms. Elijah takes him. The boy's body is cold, inert, heavy as the pain that now pervades the room. Without another word, the prophet goes up to the upper room of the house, the room where he himself lived. There he places the boy on his bed. Then he closes the door. The room is small. Only a narrow window lets in shafts of light. The air is thick. Elijah looks up at the wooden ceiling, then down at the body before him. Nothing in that moment seems the same as it did in the days before. Nothing he knows has prepared him for this, because even those who live by miracles also face the mystery of mourning. For a while he doesn't say a word. He just breathes heavily. His chest rises and falls with tension. And then, as if crossing the limit of what he's ever experienced, he doubles over. He falls to his knees, and for the first time since arriving at the widow's house, he cries out, "O Lord, my God, have you even brought evil upon this widow with whom I am staying by killing her son?" The prayer doesn't come as an eloquent speech. It comes as a groan, as a question, as someone who feels responsible for something they didn't cause but which completely involves them. Elijah is facing something new. It's not about provision but about loss. It's not about food but about life. He lies down on top of the boy, a symbolic, desperate gesture. He stretches his body over the child's, measuring himself against death. 3 times he does it. 3 times he cries out. 3 times he begs. "Lord my God, I beg you, bring this boy's soul back to his body." No answer, no thunder, no angel, just the plea of a man alone with a lifeless body in a cramped room in the house of a foreign woman. There Elijah discovers that the faith that moves mountains can also be torn apart by pain, that there is no spiritual immunity against life's tragedies, that even homes sustained by daily miracles can suddenly be visited by death, and that the most powerful cry is not the one that comes from the pulpit, but the one that comes from the depths of despair. As the prophet lies over the boy, time seems to stretch. His own heartbeat seems to echo in the room, but from the boy, nothing. The woman's faith seems to have vanished. The house, once filled with the aroma of bread, now smells of tears. And Elijah, the man who confronted kings and announced judgments, now finds himself facing his most intimate test. What if death doesn't retreat? What if the boy doesn't return? What if the promise ends like this, broken, incomplete, bitter? Everything he heard at Cherith, everything he experienced in Zarephath, all the trust he had planted in God's faithfulness, now tested in ways never before. Because there is a kind of faith for when the sky shuts off the rain, another kind for when bread is always there. But there is a rarer kind, the faith that persists in the face of the silence of death. Elijah doesn't cry for glory. He doesn't ask for explanations. He doesn't demand justice, nor does he threaten fire from heaven. He simply begs as if holding the thread of life with both hands, as if he refuses to accept that the body before him is the end. Downstairs, the mother waits. Time stretches cruelly. Every minute is a punishment. Her son was in her arms, and now he's in the hands of the man she blamed. The woman doesn't know whether to hate or wait, to be silent or scream. Pain paralyzes her. The bread on the table doesn't matter. The oil doesn't matter either. All that matters is what's happening up there. Upstairs, Elijah remains motionless, now hunched over the bed, looking at the boy's face. The same question throbs within him. Lord, up to here. And at that threshold, he makes no promises. He doesn't recite verses. He doesn't recall past victories. He simply remains, waiting for something he's never seen happen before. Because so far God has proven that he can feed, that he can sustain, that he can hide, that he can send ravens, that he can multiply flour. But bring life back. Elijah never saw it. The people of Israel never saw it. The history of humanity never saw it. But when the pain goes beyond the limits of the known miracle, something needs to happen. The room hasn't changed. The child's body remains motionless on the bed. Outside, life goes on as if nothing had happened. The neighbors sweep their doors. The noisy market trades scarce goods. The dry fields wait for a rain that never comes. But there in that narrow room, there is a battle being fought between the visible and the invisible. Elijah is alone. No instructions from heaven. No angels descend. No voice echoes from the clouds, but he does not cease. The cry within him is no longer just a request. It is a confrontation, a clash against the limits of nature. The prophet who has faced kings and endured the drought of the desert now faces an even fiercer adversary: death. There are no weapons, there are no strategies, only faith remains. Elijah approaches again. His hands tremble, but he doesn't hesitate. He lies down on top of the boy, stretching his entire body over the child. Forehead to forehead, hands to hands, heart to heart. A gesture strange to human eyes but charged with spiritual meaning. It's like saying, "Take me, not him." It is as if his life were being offered as a bridge, as a shield, as intercession. Then he cries out, not in a low voice, not formally. He shouts to the sky with all his remaining strength. "Lord my God, I beg you, bring this boy's soul back to his body." Silence answers. Elijah stands up, takes a deep breath, and lies down on top of the boy again. The wood of the bed creaks. The prophet's body is heavy. His skin touches the child's cold skin. His eyes close, and again the prayer bursts forth like fire from an altar. "Lord my God, I beg you." For a second time the sky remains silent. No tremor, no breeze, but Elijah doesn't stop. The mother's despair is placed in his hands. God's promises are at stake. His very identity as a prophet depends on that moment. If God doesn't answer, what good was all the rest? Then for the third time he reaches out. One last attempt, one last plea, a faith taken to the limit of the impossible, a cry that is not based on previous experiences because there has never been a precedent. "Lord my God, I beg you." Time bends. The room seems to rise from the earth and hover between worlds. The prophet remains motionless over the body like a shadow of supplication. Elijah's soul at that moment is not in the room. It is in God. Every cell in his body is interceding, not with words, with life. It was there at the height of the impossible that the sky moved. No trumpets, no lightning, no warnings, just a light, almost imperceptible breath. A sudden warmth that passes through the child's cold skin, a subtle shiver in the boy's chest. His eyes, which had been closed, tremble. His breath, previously absent, returns with a fragile but powerful sound. The boy lives. Elijah steps back, stunned. He watches in disbelief as color returns to the child's face. The small body moves, the eyes open. The soul has returned. The prayer was heard. The boundary between life and death was crossed. For a moment the prophet simply contemplates. There are no words sufficient for that moment. It is the greatest miracle his eyes have ever seen. God not only sustained them through the drought, he reversed the sentence of death. Elijah, who once shut the heavens with a word, now saw them open with a shout. He stands up with the boy in his arms. He descends the stairs slowly, as if carrying more than one body, carrying a revelation. The mother, sitting in the corner of the house, enveloped in silence and tears, looks up at the sound of footsteps. Elijah approaches and, without saying a word, places the living boy in her arms. She holds him tightly as if she'll lose him again, but he's there, breathing, alive. The miracle is no longer just the bread that never ends. It's life returning where death had once held sway. The boy looks at her. His eyes, the same eyes that seemed empty a moment ago, now shine with the reflection of eternity. Elijah watches the scene, his chest still heaving, his hands still trembling. And it is then that the woman looks at him, no longer with the pain of someone accusing, but with the certainty of someone who understands. Now I know that you are a man of God and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth. She's not talking about bread or oil. She's talking about the invisible, the non-negotiable. She's talking about authority. Because when the impossible happens, the world discovers who really speaks in the name of the Almighty. But the miracle, glorious as it is, doesn't end Elijah's mission. On the contrary, it's merely a harbinger of something even greater. Because if God is capable of raising a dead child, what will he do before a nation dead in idolatry? If life triumphed within a home, what will happen when Elijah stands before an entire people who have forgotten the God of their fathers? The time in Zarephath is coming to an end. The sky, once closed, begins to change. The wind blows differently and the prophet's heart burns with a new purpose. The woman's eyes, still tearful, never leave the child now breathing in her arms. The body that once weighed down with the reminder of mourning now pulses with life. There is no scream, no euphoria, only the thick silence of reverence. A miracle doesn't need to be noisy to be eternal. She runs her fingers over the child's face as if she needs to touch it to believe it. She feels the warmth. She hears the breathing. The chest rises and falls. The boy is alive. He is there. Elijah stands watching but doesn't interfere. This moment is no longer his. It is hers. And it belongs to the God who heard a cry never before heard in the history of mankind. Then, with her arms still firmly around her son, she looks up and says, her voice breaking but full of conviction, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth." It's a simple statement, but it encapsulates months of transformation. The woman who once prepared her last meal, who barely knew the God of Israel, who lived in the land of Sidon amid idols and uncertainty, now recognizes the true God. Not just as a source of provision, but as one who has power over life itself. That poor isolated house in Zarephath becomes an altar. There is no incense, no animal sacrifice, but there is faith. A faith watered with tears, shaped by hunger and matured in grief. And it is this faith that now blossoms in the face of a miracle that surpasses the limits of reason. Elijah doesn't respond. This isn't the time for words. He calmly descends the steps of the upper room. The boy nestles in his mother's lap, still weak but fully alive. The flame of hope, once extinguished, reignites with silent force. The air in the house seems lighter, the light warmer. Eternity seems to have passed by. For days, maybe weeks, the routine returns, but not as before. Something is different. The flour still doesn't run out. The oil still flows, but now all of this is just a side effect because the house has seen something no other in Israel has seen. The God who not only sustains but who restores life. The boy walks through the house with slow but steady steps. His mother watches him with the eyes of someone who has lost something and received it back. And Elijah feels a new weight within him, not the weight of a burden but of a mission, as if every event up until this point had been preparation, as if the boy's death and resurrection were the echo of something greater, something yet to come. God didn't call Elijah just to provide, nor just to run away or hide. He didn't raise him up just to announce droughts or survive in silence. God formed him to demolish thrones, to tear down altars, to expose the falsehood of gods who do nothing. and to reveal that the Lord alone is God. This is the climax of the retreat, not the calm of daily bread, nor the consolation of a personal miracle, but the call that rises in the prophet's heart. The closed heavens were only the beginning. The hiding place by the brook, the time of preparation. The widow's house, the place of maturation. Now the stage is being set for something much bigger. The wind begins to change. Rumors reach Zarephath. Extreme famine grips Israel. Ahab grows increasingly restless. Jezebel persecutes prophets, exterminating faith wherever she can. The people bow before Baal, begging for rain, but the sky remains silent. The Lord's altar is abandoned, and Elijah's name has become legend, sought in every city, hunted like a criminal, feared, the man who closed the heavens, the man who disappeared. But nobody knows what really happened to him. No one imagines that far from human eyes, God was teaching him to bring life where there was once death. No one understands that while famine ravaged Israel, Elijah learned to depend on invisible bread. That while idolatry grew in the public squares, the prophet witnessed the impossible unfold in silence in a forgotten house in Phoenicia. The woman of Zarephath, who once questioned whether Elijah had brought misfortune, now calls him a man of God. She hadn't read the scriptures, she hadn't met the patriarchs, but she saw, she touched, she lived. Elijah didn't need to prove his authority with words. He revealed it with presence, with constancy, with faith. And this faith, silent and profound, is what drives him now. He knows the hour is approaching. The time of hiding is ending. The God who sends ravens, who sustains widows, who raises boys from the dead, is the same one that will summon the prophet back to the center of the conflict. Because the boy's return to life is more than a personal victory. It's an announcement, an invisible preparation for a clash that will mark generations. The stage will no longer be a silent room. It will be a mountain. And before it will stand kings, multitudes, and prophets speaking in the name of false gods. The doubt of an entire nation will be cast into the fire, and heaven's answer will change everything. Elijah, in the silence of the early morning, stands up. He goes to the door. He takes a deep breath. The wind blows from the south. The heavens remain overcast, but his heart is ready. The boy sleeps peacefully. So does the widow. But the prophet knows that the time of anonymity has come to an end. The God who sustained, the God who tested, the God who spoke in whispers, now is going to speak in fire. The path before Elijah now stretches without return. Each step he takes moves him away from Zarephath and closer to the heart of the conflict. The time of silence is over. For 3 long years the heavens have kept their mouths shut. Not a drop, not a dew, not a response. The land of Israel groans. The springs have dried up. The fields have died. The flocks have disappeared. And with them the faith of many also withered. Ahab, the king who dared to defy the Lord, still occupies the throne. But his arrogance is now pressed by crisis. What began as contempt for the prophet's word has turned to fear. Jezebel, his queen, responds to the judgment with fury. She exterminates prophets, persecutes believers, and erects altars to Baal on every visible mountain. What should have been repentance has become reinforced idolatry. But in this scenario of darkness, God speaks again. Go, show yourself to Ahab, for I will send rain upon the land. It's the first time in years that Elijah has been ordered to come out of hiding, and not just to walk, but to present himself before the king who swore he would die. The same Elijah who remained silent at the brook and wept in the widow's chamber now rises with a different posture. His feet walk, but it's his faith that advances. Because when God tells him to go, fear no longer has a place. The prophet heads toward Samaria, the capital of the kingdom. The scars of drought are everywhere. Dry trees, empty cisterns, abandoned villages. The air carries the taste of dust. The people's eyes reflect hunger, despair, and revolt. And amidst whispers, a name still circulates. Elijah. Some curse him, others search for him. Many doubt whether he is still alive, but no one has forgotten him. On the other side, Ahab also moves. He sends messengers everywhere. He shares tasks with his trusted steward, Obadiah, a man of integrity, a faithful servant of the Lord, yet he serves in the royal palace. a walking paradox. Obadiah fears God yet lives among the wicked. He risks his own life to hide 100 prophets in caves and feeds them bread and water in secret. His loyalty is high even surrounded by earthly kings. It is in the middle of this journey that the improbable happens. Obadiah walks along a barren path examining dry wells when he sees in the distance a lone hooded man walking toward him. The figure approaches with determined steps. Obadiah's heart sinks. He recognizes that face. "Is that you, Elijah?" The prophet stops before him, looks at him firmly but calmly. "I am. Go and tell your master, look, Elijah is here." Obadiah steps back, startled. His expression changes from surprise to fear. "What sin have I committed that you have delivered your servant into the hands of Ahab so he can kill me?" Obadiah knows the king. He knows that Ahab searched for Elijah throughout the nations. He made kings swear not to hide him. And now the prophet reappears as if he had never disappeared. If Obadiah goes and Elijah disappears again, he will die for treason. "As the Lord your God lives," Obadiah replies, "there has never been a nation or kingdom where my master has not sent to look for you. And now you say, go and tell them that Elijah is here." But Elijah does not waver. "As the Lord of hosts lives before whom I stand, I will surely present myself to Ahab this very day." The confidence is unshakable. It's not arrogance, it's certainty. Elijah knows that he did not return by his own will but by the direction of the Most High, and the one who orders it also guarantees protection. Obadiah, still hesitant, looks at the prophet. He sees in his eyes the same fire as before, but something else also shines there, something he doesn't fully understand, a kind of peace that can only come from someone who has come close to the impossible and seen life return. Then Obadiah bows and leaves. Elijah remains standing. The sun beats down on the cracked ground, but nothing makes him retreat. He knows he's about to meet again the man who represents everything Israel has become. Power without fear, government without justice, throne without God. Ahab awaits him. The king, seeing him from afar, doesn't hesitate. He advances toward Elijah with an expression filled with contained hatred. "Is it you, troubler of Israel?" The question cuts the air like a blade. But Elijah, firm, doesn't look away. His feet don't move. His voice doesn't tremble. "I have not troubled Israel, but you and your father's house have, because you have forsaken the Lord's commands and followed Baal." The answer comes like thunder before the king. Elijah does not bow. He does not apologize. He does not back down. He points out the true source of the crisis. Idolatry, not prophecy. The drought is not the fault of the messenger, but of the nation that abandoned the God who sustained it. The confrontation is direct, straightforward. Elijah isn't there to negotiate. He's there to declare spiritual war. The physical crisis ravaging Israel is merely a reflection of a much deeper failure. The drought in the heart of a people who exchanged truth for deception. And now, with courage rekindled and purpose renewed, Elijah makes the call that will echo through the hills, villages, and palaces. "Gather all Israel to Mount Carmel along with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. It's the beginning of the end. A public trial is being called. The people will watch. The false prophets will be there. Ahab, Jezebel, everyone will see. And the God who responded with provision, who sustained with ravens, who multiplied bread, who restored life, will now respond with fire." Elijah turns around, not waiting for approval. He doesn't need an audience. He just needs to obey. Mount Carmel will be the stage, but the fire has not yet descended. The sound of the royal order echoes. The messengers depart. From city to city, village after village, the heralds call the people. Elijah's name returns to the fore, no longer as the fugitive but as the instigator of a public meeting. Mount Carmel, once silent, begins to transform into the scene of an inevitable confrontation. A duel of voices, of creeds, of gods, and above all, a duel of loyalties. The people climb, some out of curiosity, others out of fear, many out of hope. 3 years of overcast skies have dried up not only the fields but also their hearts. There's hunger in the streets, but there's thirst in the soul. No one knows what to expect. They only know that Elijah is back and that something will happen. The mountain is sacred, a place of ancient significance. Its slopes overlook the Mediterranean. Its view reaches the devastated lands of Israel. A high stage, a natural altar. Elijah chose well. There, with the winds crossing the rocks and the sky as a ceiling, everything would be exposed, including hearts. Ahab also appears. His entourage accompanies him with armed soldiers and suspicious looks. But the king, no matter how hard he tries to maintain an appearance of authority, knows he is not in control. The stage may be public, but the script belongs to the God Elijah serves. And then under the watchful gaze of the crowd, the prophet stands up. He stands alone. No other prophet of Yahweh accompanies him. On the other side stand the 450 prophets of Baal, imposing, dressed in their ceremonial robes, proud of their influence at Queen Jezebel's table. But the solitary man is undaunted. His eyes roam the people. His feet stand firm on the sacred ground. His voice cuts like a blade. How long will you waver between two thoughts? The question strikes like a bolt of lightning among those present. It's not just a theological challenge. It's a moral summons. It's an indictment of a nation's indecision. Elijah isn't just speaking to the prophets. He's speaking to the people, to those who remained silent, to those who watched idolatry grow in silence. If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, follow him. The people don't respond. The silence is deafening. No one speaks up, not even to defend Baal, not even to affirm their faith in Yahweh. A divided heart is incapable of confessing. The fear of taking a stand is stronger than the truth. Elijah takes a deep breath. He knows he's exactly where he's supposed to be. He knows this is the moment he's been prepared for, from Cherith, Zarephath, the widow's chamber, the cry for life. It's all led him here. I am the only prophet of the Lord left, he declares. But the prophets of Baal are 450 men. It's a visible disadvantage, a stark contrast. But Elijah knows when God is present, numbers lose power. And then with unwavering courage, he proposes the challenge. Give us 2 bulls. Let them choose one for themselves. Cut it into pieces and lay it on the wood, but do not put fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood, but do not put fire to it. Then you shall call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, and the God who answers by fire is God. A murmur runs through the crowd. Some look at each other, others nod. Finally, a clear criterion, a visible sign, a simple, definitive criterion. Whoever answers will be recognized as truthful. The prophets of Baal accept. They are confident. After all, they have the numbers, the influence, the support of the court. They are accustomed to performances, lengthy rituals, and manipulating the people's emotions. They believe they can make something happen. Elijah, on the other hand, remains calm. He doesn't control the fire, but he knows the one who can bring it down. The crowd settles. The air is tense. The hill is full. There is anticipation. There is fear. And for some, there is faith. For the first time in a long time, the people are faced with a decision that cannot be postponed. Elijah steps back, leaving room for the prophets of Baal. He observes. He doesn't interfere. It's as if he's saying, go first, show everything you have. The men approach the altar. They prepare the wood. They cut the bull. They arrange the stones. And they begin to invoke the name of their God. O Baal, answer us. They shout. They cry out. They march around the altar. Choreographed movements, repetitive chants, theatrical gestures. The people watch, waiting for some sign, but nothing. The hours pass. The sun moves across the sky and they continue. O Baal, hear us, but there is no voice. There is no answer. There is no one. Elijah watches, his arms crossed, his eyes steady. There is no provocation yet, just waiting, because he knows Baal's silence is necessary before God's fire reveals itself. The people, once so divided, begin to grow suspicious. Murmurs grow, children grow restless. Elderly people shake their heads. A burning question begins to emerge. What if Baal was never a god? What if all this worship was just an act? What if silence is the answer? Elijah remains. The faith that brought him here knows no need to rush. It waits. Because where there is truth, it is not time that defines the outcome. It is the presence of God. The sun is now high. Sweat drips from the faces of the prophets of Baal. Their voices begin to falter, but they carry on. They sing. They jump. They hurt themselves, they shed blood, they despair. But the sky remains silent, and the people begin to realize the absence of an answer is already an answer. The climax approaches. The Lord's altar still lies in ruins. The people are still divided, but something is changing. Slowly, eyes turn to the lone prophet. Because if Baal has failed before everyone, perhaps the God Elijah serves is about to show that he has never ceased to be God. As the sun begins to cast its light over Carmel, the cries of the prophets of Baal become hoarse, irregular, almost pathetic. Their blood-stained faces, weary bodies, and sweat-soaked garments paint a picture of despair, and their altar built with so much effort remains untouched, cold, and empty. Elijah takes a few steps forward. The crowd, already exhausted from waiting, falls silent upon noticing the prophet's movement. He walks among the scattered stones, passes by the desecrated altar, ignores the confused looks and the low murmurs, and heads toward what remains of another altar. The ancient altar of the Lord, now in ruins. There in front of everyone he kneels. With steady hands and a resolute gaze he begins to rebuild. He picks up a stone, then another. One by one, 12 in all, each representing a tribe of Israel. As he builds, no one dares speak, not even the defeated prophets. Elijah doesn't need to shout. He doesn't need to run. He simply rebuilds what was forgotten. The altar of the covenant. When finished, he digs a trench around it, wide enough to hold water. He carefully places the firewood. Then he prepares the bull, the same one that had been separated. But contrary to what common sense would indicate, Elijah orders something unthinkable. Fill 4 jars with water and pour it over the burnt offering and the wood. The crowd stirs, water, in times of drought on a sacrifice, but they obey. Do it again. The water runs, it wets the wood, it soaks the meat, it drips down the stones. Do it a 3rd time, and now everything is saturated. The ditch around it fills up. The altar seems drowned, nothing there should burn, and perhaps that is exactly the point. Elijah walks away. There is no spectacle, there is no choreography, just silence. And in that silence he raises his eyes to the heavens and prays. O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. It's a short prayer. No repetitions, no manipulation, no sweat, no blood. Answer me, Lord. Answer me so that these people may know that you, Lord, are God and that you have turned their hearts back to you. And then it happens. A boom, dry as thunder in a blue sky. Light tears through the sky. A column of fire descends as if slicing through the air in fury. In an instant, the entire altar is consumed. Not just the sacrifice, but the wood, the stones, the water, the earth, everything. Every drop, every fragment, every physical testimony of that altar is swallowed up in seconds. The ground trembles. The heat is felt even from a distance. The light blinds for a moment, and when everything calms down, only ash remains. The crowd can't resist. Legs buckle, faces tilt downward. No doubt remains. The Lord is God. The Lord is God. The clamor echoes across the hillsides, a unanimous cry. There is no more wavering between two thoughts. There is no more complicit silence. The nation prostrates itself before the truth. Elijah watches, but he is not exalted. The glory is not his. He did not call down fire to impress. He called down fire to restore. And now, with the people broken, the prophet stands up as an instrument of divine justice. Seize the prophets of Baal, he shouts. Let none of them escape. And so it is done. The men who deceived Israel, who ate at Jezebel's table, who pretended to speak for the gods, are now unmasked and destroyed. A judgment without hesitation, a necessary act to purify the land. Carmel becomes an altar, but also a tribunal. The sun is already beginning to set on the horizon. The sky, still golden from the reflection of the flames, is now beginning to change. A different breeze blows from the sea. A new sound insinuates itself in Elijah's ears. He recognizes it, it's the promise approaching. But while the echoes of worship still reverberate among the rocks, far away in the dark halls of the palace, another voice begins to rise. not of reverence but of fury, because not everyone bowed down. Jezebel still breathes. And the fire that purified the altar ignited in her a hatred that Carmel had never seen. The smell of ash still lingers in the air. The slopes of Carmel begin to empty. The people descend in silence as if carrying a sacred secret. The altar that was consumed by fire still smokes, but worship has given way to restlessness. Something has changed in the heavens, yes, but something is also stirring on the earth. News travels fast. Even before Elijah descends the mountain, messengers are already crossing valleys and villages toward the capital. This isn't just a miracle, it's a public humiliation. Jezebel, the foreign queen, wife of Ahab, devotee of Baal, had her prophets annihilated, her cult ridiculed, her influence questioned before the entire nation. When the reports reach her ears, fury has no containment. Jezebel rises from the dark halls like a storm. The servants retreat. The soldiers fall silent. No one dares to contradict the wounded queen. Her eyes burn brighter than the fire that fell from the sky. But what she cannot defeat with gods, she will try to destroy with blood. She doesn't speak, she decrees. May the gods do so to me, and more also, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like one of them. The threat reaches Elijah's ear like a hidden dagger. After all the confrontation, after the clear victory, a single sentence coming from the palace is enough to collapse his soul. There is no time to think. There is no time to question. The fear that was absent on Carmel now takes hold with force. Elijah, the prophet who faced the king, who defied 450 prophets, who called down fire from heaven, runs, not for the survival of the body, but for the exhaustion of the soul. He goes south. He passes through Samaria, through Judah. He leaves his servant in a city and goes alone into the desert. His body cries out for rest, his mind for relief, but his spirit cries out for an end. After days of walking among rocks, sand, and silence, Elijah sits under a juniper tree, a small, almost shadeless tree in the middle of nowhere. And there the man of God collapses. His face is covered in dust. His eyes are sunken. His beard is dry. His skin is marked by the sun and fatigue. His soul is exhausted, so he prays. But it is not a prayer of clamor nor of worship. It is a plea for death. It is enough, that's enough. Take now, O Lord, my life, for I am no better than my fathers. The wind whispers through the branches. No voice answers. No vision manifests. Elijah no longer wants to be a prophet. No longer wants to be a man. He wants to disappear. After all, the threat of a queen disarms him more than all the prophets of Baal. But whoever looks from the outside without understanding will not see cowardice. They will see humanity. Elijah is not denying his faith. He is expressing his pain, because even those who see the fire from heaven also cry when loneliness weighs too much. He lies down, his face to the ground. He closes his eyes, not for rest but for surrender. The sand mixes with sweat. The silence of the desert now lulls him. He wants to sleep, to avoid feeling, to avoid remembering, perhaps to avoid waking up. Because there are days when faith doesn't disappear, but falls silent in bitter silence. In the sky there is no cloud. On the ground there is no fruit. In the heart there is no strength. But in the invisible there is movement. While the prophet sleeps under the juniper tree without knowing, the heavens that once sent fire now send compassion. And from above comes a messenger, not with a sword, nor with trumpets, but with warm bread and hope. The heavenly presence doesn't come with thunder, nor with lightning, nor with trumpets or earthquakes. It comes simply. A touch, the aroma of baking bread, a jug of water beside his weary head. Elijah awakens, not understanding. His eyes blink against the desert sun. His body still aches. His soul still bleeds, but something has changed. He didn't ask for bread, but God brought it. He didn't ask for comfort, but God arrived. The angel doesn't speak of judgment. He doesn't demand faith. He doesn't demand action. He simply touches and says, "Get up and eat because the journey will be too long for you." Elijah, still silent, obeys. He eats the bread and drinks the water. The food is not just physical sustenance. It is a symbol that God still cares even when the human will wants to give up. The prophet slowly rises. His body continues, still frail, but his heart beats again. There are no crowds, no altars, no nations. Only the desert and the subtle presence of the eternal. For 40 days and 40 nights, Elijah walks, not in search of glory but of meaning. His steps lead him to the same sacred lands where Moses heard the fiery voice of the Lord. There at Mount Horeb, also called Sinai, the rock of revelation awaits him. Elijah finds a cave, dark, cold, empty, and he hides not from the world but from himself. He huddles in the corner, his hands grip his knees. Silence envelops him, and in this void of sound, a voice, soft, unmistakable, pierces the darkness of his soul. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" The question isn't one of rebuke, it's one of redemption. As if God were saying, "Speak, tell me what's suffocating you, tell me what brought you to this hole, I'm listening." And Elijah, his eyes burning, finally spills what was trapped. "I have been jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars and killed your prophets. And I am left alone, and they seek my life." It's a confession, a stifled cry, not from lack of faith but from excessive exhaustion. He's not lying. He's exposing his naked heart. He did everything right. He spoke in God's name. He called down fire from heaven, but still he feels alone. And then God commands, "Come out of the cave and stand on this mountain before the Lord." Elijah obeys. He stands at the edge of the entrance. His face is covered. His eyes are alert. First, a great and strong wind shatters the mountains. Rocks fall, the earth trembles, branches snap, but the Lord is not in the wind. After, an earthquake shakes. The earth cracks open. Dust rises. The ground seems to break beneath his feet, but the Lord is not in the earthquake. Then a fire consumes. The hillside flames. Flames dance in the air. The sky turns orange and red, but the Lord is not in the fire. And then after all this, a soft whisper, a murmur, a light breeze, something that doesn't hurt the ears but penetrates the soul. Elijah covers his face with his cloak. He knows there is God. The Almighty, who could manifest himself in the fury of creation, chooses silence to speak to the broken. Because someone with a broken heart doesn't need a spectacle. They need presence. The same soft voice repeats, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And again the prophet responds with the same words, not by mechanical repetition, but because his feelings have not yet changed. But now he is no longer alone in speaking. So God lifts him up with words. He doesn't rebuke him. He doesn't condemn him. God sends him. Go back your way. And he gives him a threefold mission. He will anoint kings. He will anoint judgments. But above all, he will anoint a successor, because the time of loneliness is coming to an end. Anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, as prophet in your place. The order does not come as punishment. It comes as relief. Because even the greatest need continuity, partnership, heritage. Elijah did not fail, but it's time to share the burden. And before he says anything, God adds, "I have also left 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal and every mouth that has not kissed him." Elijah listens, breathes. His shoulders relax. All this time he thought he was alone, but the whisper reveals what the noise hid. God never stopped acting, even when it didn't seem like it. The mission continues, but now he no longer walks alone. Elijah comes down from the mountain not as one fleeing but as one returning with direction. His discouragement has not yet completely dissipated, but now he walks alongside hope. There is a new mission in his hands, a seed to be sown, a successor to be called. God is not finished with him, and he will not be finished alone. The roads lead to open fields, fertile land, dust kicked up by the hooves of oxen plowing the soil. In the distance, the sound of plows, the smell of cut earth. They are in Abel Meholah, south of the Jordan, where farmers do their daily tasks without imagining that on that day an eternal call will interrupt the ordinary course of life. Elisha stands there among 12 yoke of oxen. He himself leads the last pair. His hands are steady on the plow. His eyes are fixed on the straight line. He is young, strong, the son of Shaphat from a wealthy family. But his demeanor is not that of a spoiled heir. It is that of one who works, one who respects the land, one who honors the sweat of his brow. And then Elijah approaches. There is no conversation, there is no speech, Not a single word, just a gesture. The prophet takes off his mantle, a symbol of prophetic authority, of divine calling, of burning mission, and throws it on Elisha. The young man freezes. The still warm garment of lambskin rests on his back like a sacred weight. Elisha looks around. His oxen low, still yoked. The land before him is only half plowed. But what has fallen on his shoulders is heavier than any load he has ever carried. There are no explanations, but there are no doubts either. Elisha understands. Without hesitation, he abandons the oxen and runs after Elijah. "Let me kiss my father and mother," he asks, "and then I will follow you." Elijah seriously just answers, "Go and come back. What did I do to you?" But his words aren't an invitation to give up. They're a reminder the decision is Elisha's. The mantle has been cast. The choice is his. Ordinary life still calls to him, but God's voice has already touched him. Elisha stops. He takes a deep breath. And then he does the unthinkable. He returns to the field, looks at the oxen, hands them over, kills the team, breaks the plow, burns the wood, cooks the meat, serves the people. Not as a sentimental farewell, but as a public declaration. There is no turning back. The fire blazes. The flames rise. The smell of roasted beef spreads. Work tools turn to kindling. Elisha is burning his past, breaking with his old life, cutting off all avenues of return. The improvised meal becomes a symbol. The land that was once furrowed now serves as an altar, and the young farmer becomes the prophet's disciple. The choice was made. And then, without long speeches, without formal ceremonies, Elisha leaves. He follows Elijah, not as an equal yet, but as a servant, an apprentice, a silent observer of someone who has walked deserts, faced kings, heard voices in caves, and defied the heavens. Elisha doesn't know where he's going. He doesn't know what it will be like, but he knows he's been called, and that's enough. Their journey begins among hills, villages, and fields. The old prophet marked by the scars of time, and the young man called upon with the eyes of one who has left everything behind. Two men, one mission, a legacy in motion. But as the footsteps echo along the path, there is an invisible whisper in the air, something that neither Elijah reveals nor Elisha understands yet, a truth that heaven has already established but that earth has not yet seen. Elijah's destiny will not be that of any other man. Days pass and time marches on, but the silence of heaven never means an absence of purpose. Elijah continues on his way, now accompanied by Elisha. Together they travel through cities, teach, observe, and pray. The transition between generations is strengthened away from the crowds. It is the training of the soul done in secret. Elijah is no longer alone, and Elisha is no longer the same farmer from Abel Meholah. But while the disciple grows in the shadow of the master, a new throne rises with the same arrogance as the previous one. Ahab is dead. A tragic accident, as prophesied as it was ignored, ended his reign. In his place ascends the throne Ahaziah, his son. But instead of learning from his father's mistakes, he repeats the same choices. Idolatry, arrogance, contempt for the voice of God. Nothing changes in the palace corridors. Jezebel still breathes, and Baal still has a voice among the princes. One day Ahaziah falls from a rooftop in Samaria. Wounded, distressed, and overcome with fear of death, he sends messengers with a clear mission. "Go and inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, to find out whether I will recover from this disease." The gesture reveals the king's heart. Instead of turning to the God who delivered Israel from fire and drought, he turns to a foreign idol. He seeks answers from mute gods. He wants comfort but rejects the truth. And God sees, and God answers. Elijah, isolated once again, hears the voice of the Lord. "Get up. Go and meet the messengers of the king of Samaria and say to them, is it because there is no God in Israel that you are going to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore this is what the Lord says. You will not come down from the bed you have climbed upon, but you will surely die." Without hesitation, Elijah sets out. He intercepts the messengers midway. He delivers his word. He doesn't explain himself. He doesn't negotiate. He speaks with the authority of one who does not carry an opinion but rather a sentence. The men return to the king and report. Ahaziah frowns. "What kind of man was this who found you?" a hairy man with a leather belt around his waist. The king doesn't need to hear anymore. It is Elijah the Tishbite. The name still burns in his memory. The living legend, the prophet of fire, the one who defied his father, the one who never bowed. Overcome with pride and anger, Ahaziah decides to capture him. He orders a captain to take 50 soldiers. The mission to bring Elijah back by force. High on a hill, the prophet sits calm, the sky above, the earth below. The captain approaches arrogantly. His armor gleams in the sun. His steps are hard. "Man of God," shouts the officer. The king says, "Come down." Elijah looks up and stares at the captain. His voice is firm, heavy with weight. "If I am a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50 men." The silence lasts for a second. Then the sky opens. A flaming bolt of lightning tears through the air. The ground trembles, and in an instant the entire group is consumed. 50 bodies turn to ash. The king's authority evaporates, but Ahaziah doesn't learn. He sends another captain with another 50. The scene repeats itself. The order, the arrogance, the same shout. "Man of God, come down now." Elijah does not hesitate. "If I am a man of God, let fire come down from heaven." And the fire falls again, unstoppable, immediate. The judgment repeats itself. Justice is visible because the word of God cannot be despised with impunity. Once again Ahaziah persists. A third group is sent. Another captain, another 50, but this one is different. He doesn't shout. He doesn't impose. He doesn't raise his voice. "Man of God," he says with his face to the ground, "I beg you. May my life and the life of these 50 servants be precious in your eyes." He did not come with a sword. He came with humility, and mercy overtakes him. The voice of God speaks to Elijah. "Go down with him, don't be afraid." The prophet stands up. He accompanies the captain. He enters the palace. He faces the king. Ahaziah's eyes, pale and weakened, meet the prophet's. And Elijah says bluntly, "Because you sent messengers to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, as if there were no God in Israel, you will not come down from the bed to which you have gone up. You will surely die." The word is final, and so it happens. The king dies, sonless, no direct successors, no glory. His lineage fades like fire into cold ashes because there is no throne that can withstand the contempt for the voice of God. Elijah in turn returns to silence. He does not seek praise. He does not build temples. He does not exalt himself. He carries the awareness that the same fire that consumes in judgment will also be used in glory. But that last fire will not fall from the sky. It will rise. The dust of the soldiers burned by the sky already lies forgotten. Ahaziah is dead. The throne remains empty of fear, but the prophet no longer belongs in the corridors of power. Elijah, silent, continues on his way. Something disturbs him, but it's not fear. It's the premonition of a different end, a kind of farewell he doesn't yet understand but feels approaching. Elisha also notices. There's something in the master's eyes that has changed. A dense serenity, as if one were closer to heaven than to earth. The two walk together as they have so often done. But now each step seems to carry the weight of an eternity about to reveal itself. The day dawns over Gilgal. The east wind blows. And Elijah, looking at Elisha, says, "Stay here, I beg you, for the Lord has sent me to Bethel." But Elisha has already learned, not just by listening, but by discerning. And he answers, "As the Lord lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you." They go together. At Bethel, the sons of the prophets, young men trained in the traditions of Israel, approach Elisha and ask, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master from over your head?" He answers, "Yes, I know, be quiet. This is not the time to lament, it's the time to move on." Elijah looks at the disciple again. "Stay here, Elisha, for the Lord has sent me to Jericho." But the answer is the same. "As the Lord lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you." They continue. And once again the sons of the prophets try to warn him, and once again Elisha asks for silence. He doesn't want to say goodbye with words. He wants to say goodbye with presence. Jericho is left behind. Then Elijah says, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." But Elisha, with his eyes fixed, just walks. I won't leave you." 50 disciples follow them from a distance, watching. Elijah and Elisha approach the Jordan. The river is full. The waters flow fast. There are no boats. There are no bridges. And Elijah with tranquility takes the cloak off his shoulders. He rolls it up and strikes the waters. In an instant the river parts. Waters part to the left and right. A dry path appears between the banks. The two cross. A simple gesture but charged with authority. The same God who parted the Red Sea and the Jordan for Joshua now opens the way for one man alone. On the other side, the moment approaches. Elijah stops. He turns to Elisha. "Ask what you want me to do for you before I am taken from you." The disciple firmly responds, "I ask that a double portion of your spirit be upon me." Elijah looks at him. There is admiration in the old prophet's eyes and a quiet sorrow. "You have asked a hard thing. However, if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be done for you. But if you do not see me, it will not be done." They keep walking together, the master and the successor. None of the prophet's sons are there now, just the two of them. There's no crowd, no altar, no army. Just a dry field, a clear sky, and two hearts intertwined by a purpose that transcends life. And then the sky breaks. A subtle rumble, a heat in the air, a light that doesn't burn but envelops. The wind begins to swirl, clothes flutter, the ground trembles slightly, and a chariot of fire appears. Yes, a chariot not made by human hands, not pulled by ordinary horses. Horses of fire, shining, appear with controlled violence. The chariot moves forward as if tearing the space between two worlds, and in an instant it separates the two. Elisha is thrown backward. The wind pushes him. The ground no longer holds him up properly. He covers his face with his arm, trying to see, and before his eyes Elijah is lifted high. He doesn't die. He doesn't disappear. He is taken. A slow, powerful ascent. The prophet's body, now enveloped in light and glory, rises toward the heavens. There is no pain. There is no mourning. It's a departure unlike any other the earth has ever seen. Elisha shouts, my father, chariots of Israel and their horsemen." But Elijah doesn't answer. His body no longer belongs to the earth. He rides the invisible. The whirlwind envelops him. The clouds receive him. The sky embraces him. Eternity claims him. The disciple falls to his knees. Tears stream down his face, but not of despair, of reverence. He saw, he was a witness. And because he saw, he knows that the promise now rests upon him. The cloak falls light, soft, as if floating, as if heaven itself had delivered it into human hands. Elisha stands up. He goes to it. He takes Elijah's cloak. Its texture still holds the prophet's warmth. He holds it tightly. And then he returns to the Jordan. The 50 sons of the prophets watch him from a distance. Elisha approaches the river. He rolls up the cloak. He raises his arm. He strikes the waters and cries out, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" The waters part, and the sky responds. He who walked on earth with the Lord now rides beside him in heaven. Time passed. The stones of Carmel now lie silent. The altar no longer smokes, but its memory still burns in the hearts of those who heard Elijah's name. The brook Cherith has dried up, but its story continues to run like an invisible thread through the pages of faith. The widow's house in Zarephath no longer exudes the smell of bread, but echoes eternally as a reminder of a daily miracle. And the whirlwind, oh, the whirlwind that carried the prophet to heaven, it never quite vanished. It still blows sometimes on days of profound silence, as if blowing not just leaves to the ground, but memories of a man who walked with God and was taken by him. Elijah is gone, but the God of Elijah remains. He remains in the bread that still reaches the table of the broken, in the dew that still sustains the thirsty fields, in the fire that still consumes the impossible. He remains in the whisper to the broken soul, in the sustenance of the anonymous, in the cry of a heart that does not give up even when all around seems lost. Because the miracle of Elijah was never Elijah. It was the God who fed him with ravens, who hid him by a stream, who multiplied the widow's meal, who heard his prayer for the dead boy, who answered with fire, who defended him before kings, who restored him in caves, who raised him when he wanted to die, who surrounded him with flaming horses, who carried him away without letting him disappear from the people's memory. This God still responds. The world has changed. Ancient kings have been buried, empires have risen, palaces have fallen. But the word that Elijah carried still lives, the heavens still open, the voice still speaks. And the fire, yes, the fire still comes down. Today, perhaps you are on Carmel, surrounded by false voices, needing a sign from heaven. Perhaps you are at a drying stream, trying to understand why the miracle has ceased. Perhaps you hide in a cave, exhausted, praying for an end. Or perhaps you feel the mantle of the call has fallen upon you, and you must decide whether to burn the oxen or keep the plow. But know this, the same God who spoke to Elijah speaks to you. He hasn't changed. He still manifests himself in fire but also in silence. He still performs signs but also sustains with bread. He still raises up prophets but also comforts weary servants. He still parts seas but also opens hearts. He still sends chariots of glory but also walks alongside those who tremble. Why? The God who responded with fire on the altar today responds with grace in the soul. It's no longer about high mountains or visible storms. It's about recognizing his presence even when everything around seems dark, because even the impossible bows before him. Elijah was taken up to heaven, but before that he walked through valleys. He was the mouth of God before multitudes, but before that was shaped in solitude. What defines a prophet is not the moment he ascends to heaven. It is the path he took on earth, obeying, stumbling, rising, but never failing to listen. Today in every place there is someone who chooses to trust even without seeing, who prays even without strength, who walks even without knowing where to go, who obeys even without understanding. There is the God of Elijah. It doesn't matter if the setting is desert or cave, if the altar is in ruins, or if the heart is cracked. If God is present, even what has no exit becomes a path. And at the right time, the fire will come, not to destroy, but to glorify. If this story has moved you, if you felt the weight of Elijah's journey in your own heart, then I ask you to do something important. Click subscribe to this channel right now. Leave a like on this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Your support is what allows us to continue bringing these powerful biblical stories to life. Stories of real people who encountered the living God in the most desperate moments of their lives. 2 more incredible videos will appear on your screen in just a moment, featuring other biblical characters who also experienced unforgettable encounters with God. Don't miss them. May the same God who sustained Elijah with ravens, responded with fire, and lifted him to heaven strengthen your journey as well. Because sometimes a miracle comes when all seems lost, and God shows he's still in control.